The wind howled across the Montana plains, carrying the kind of loneliness that could break a man's spirit. Jacob Harlan stood on the porch of his weathered ranch house, staring at the horizon where the sun bled red into the earth. At 42, he'd spent half his life wrestling this land, coaxing life from dirt and praying for rain. But the ranch wasn't what haunted him. It was the silence inside the house, no laughter, no footsteps, no one to share the ache of a long day. He'd buried his wife, Sarah, 10 years ago, and with her, the dream of a family. That was until the letter arrived, trembling in his calloused hands, promising a miracle he didn't dare believe in. The letter came from a broker in Bozeman, a man with a greasy mustache and a knack for deals that smelled of desperation. A young woman, it read, pregnant, in need of a home. Her mother's willing to part with her for a price. Jacob's stomach churned at the thought, buying a person, like livestock at auction. But the broker's words gnawed at him, she's got nowhere else to go. Against every instinct, Jacob drove to the dusty saloon where the deal was set. There, shivering in a threadbare coat, stood Ellie, barely 19, her green eyes hollow with fear, her belly swollen under a faded dress. Her mother, a woman with a face carved by hard living, pocketed Jacob's money and walked away without a backward glance. Ellie didn't speak for the first 2 days at the ranch. She sat by the window, staring at the endless fields, her hands cradling her unborn child. Jacob didn't push her. He'd seen wounded animals before, knew trust took time. He left plates of food outside her door, fixed the creaky floorboards in her room, and wondered what kind of life she'd left behind. Slowly, she began to talk. Her voice was soft, like wind through grass, and carried a story that broke Jacob's heart. Her mother had been a drifter, dragging Ellie from one dead-end town to another, trading her daughter's labor for survival. When Ellie got pregnant by a boy who vanished, her mother saw her as a burden to be sold. "I didn't think anyone would ever want me," Ellie whispered one night, tears glinting in the firelight. Jacob wanted to tell her she was wrong, but words felt clumsy. Instead, he showed her. He taught her how to feed the chickens, how to mend a fence, how to spot a storm coming over the mountains. The ranch, once a place of solitude, began to hum with life. Ellie's laughter, shy at first, echoed in the barn as she named the calves Daisy, Buck, Little Star. But the challenges came fast. The townsfolk whispered about the bot girl living with the lonely rancher. Gossip twisted their story into something ugly, and Jacob's temper flared when a shopkeeper refused Ellie service. "She's not my property," he growled, slamming a fist on the counter. "She's family." Winter brought harder trials. A blizzard buried the ranch, and the cattle began to starve. Jacob worked himself to exhaustion, digging paths through the snow, but the herd was thinning. Ellie, now 8 months pregnant, insisted on helping despite Jacob's protests. One night, as they hauled hay to the barn, she collapsed, clutching her side. Fear gripped Jacob like a vice. The nearest doctor was miles away, and the roads were impassable. He carried her inside, praying harder than he ever had. Using what little he knew from tending livestock, he kept her warm and calm until the pain passed. "You're not losing me," Ellie said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Or this baby." Spring broke through, and with it, Ellie's daughter was born, a tiny, squalling miracle named Hope. Jacob held her, tears streaming down his weathered face, feeling a love he thought he'd lost forever. But the ranch was failing. The blizzard had cost them too many cattle, and bills piled up like snowdrifts. Ellie, still weak from childbirth, refused to let Jacob carry the burden alone. She sold her mother's old necklace, the only thing she'd kept from her past, to buy feed for the herd. "We're in this together," she told him, her eyes fierce with determination. The biggest challenge wasn't the ranch or the gossip, it was trust. Jacob wrestled with guilt, wondering if he'd done right by taking Ellie in, if he was enough to give her and Hope a future. Ellie, too, fought ghosts of her own fear that she'd never be more than the girl her mother sold. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Jacob confessed his doubts. "I wanted to save you," he said, voice raw. "But maybe I just needed saving too." Ellie reached for his hand, her touch steady. "You gave me a home, Jacob. Not just a roof, a real one." Their bond deepened, not as father and daughter, but as equals who'd found each other in the wreckage of their lives. Together, they rebuilt. Ellie had a knack for numbers and started managing the ranch's books, finding ways to cut costs. Jacob took on odd jobs in town, swallowing his pride to keep them afloat. The townsfolk, seeing their resilience, began to soften. A neighbor brought over a crib for Hope, another offered to buy their surplus hay. The ranch survived, not just because of hard work, but because of the family they'd become years later. Jacob stood on the same porch, watching Ellie teach Hope to ride a pony. The ranch was thriving now, the fields green and full of life. He thought of Sarah, wondering if she'd send Ellie to him, a miracle he'd waited for without knowing. The loneliness that once consumed him was gone, replaced by the sound of Hope's giggles and Ellie's voice calling, "Supper's ready." He'd found more than a family, he'd found purpose. The story of Jacob and Ellie spread beyond the plains, a testament to what happens when broken souls choose to mend each other. It wasn't about the money that changed hands or the gossip that tried to tear them down. It was about two people who, against all odds, built a home from trust and love. For anyone watching, the message was clear: miracles don't always look like you expect, but they come when you open your heart to the possibility.